Hi everybody, Dave here again with another model rocket build, and today I am building the Hex-3 by Estes. And this, in their old system of classification, this is considered a little bit more advanced rocket. It's not one you want to try on your first rocket ever. And mainly it's because there's a lot of relatively thin cardboard parts that have to be properly folded and attached to each other in order to keep this symmetrical and in proper flying shape. Otherwise, there's not really that much to it. So if we check out our sheet of instructions here and what we need to have, we have an engine tube here, a small package that contains the launch lug, engine retainer hook, engine block, and centering rings. Then we have a laser cut cardboard piece here that acts as the base and also as the centering ring for the aft end of the motor tube. And then we have two printed pieces of cardstock here that we will cut out and fold to make the structure of the rocket. Now the first part of the instructions shows to cut out the marking guide for the engine mount. Now the problem with that is that this is the cutout piece, but if we cut that out, that is going to cut out part of our instructions here for assembling the legs. Okay, so make sure you've got this in your memory first, or you could copy this onto photocopy paper. But when we do cut this out, it's going to cut out this part, which is simply telling you to cut out the legs around all the outlines. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and cut it out because I've got the rest of the sheet here to tell me what I'm doing with the legs. And here you can use either your hobby knife or a pair of scissors. I've got a hobby knife handier at the moment, so I'm going to use that. And of course, always be careful when you're cutting that you have something protecting the surface underneath, and this helps prevent irate spouses, significant others, or parents. Alright, and then we will put this around the tube. And here you want to have a little piece of transparent tape or masking tape handy just to hold it on. Okay, and so this has a front marking here, and so I'm going to go ahead and just take a pencil and mark my tube up here as front. That way I'll always be in the right orientation as I'm doing things here. Okay, and now I'm just going to wrap this around the middle. And then we just line up the alignment lines there. Here I'm just going to put a piece of tape over it. Alright, and so now it says to mark all of the lines. And so, unlike what we see in most models, we actually have two launch lug lines here. And we're going to mark those as LL, and then do the same thing on the other end. Okay, and then we have these EH lines, so we'll mark those as well. And over here. And these are the engine hook lines. That's what EH is. There you go. Okay, and now we're going to transfer this over to a door frame or other means to draw down here. And I am going to use my line guide, as I usually do in these videos. Okay, so we're just going to extend these lines all the way down the tube. Okay. Alright, you might notice there's a little bit off on the tick marks. I always go by the straightness of the guide rather than how straight my initial tick marks were. So this is fine. Okay, and now we're going to make marks for our engine. Okay, so over here at number 5, we need to make a mark at 2.5 inches from the base. Okay, so there's our front end again. We're going to do this over here on the engine hook line. So 2.5 inches or 6.4 centimeters if you are metrically inclined. That's going to be right here, in my case on where my E is. Okay, and then we need to cut a slit there, and it turns out that all we have to do is cut through the line between the two longitudinal lines that we put on there. So that's just going to go right here. And this is where our engine hook will fit in. And so if we take our engine hook out, that is going to go in here. Just like that. Okay, well, we need to make a few other marks. I'm going to take that out again. And for our next mark, we need 1 1/8 inches, or 2.9 centimeters, also along the engine hook lines. Okay, so that's going to be right here. And that's going to be where the engine hook sleeve, the white ring in here, is going to go. Alright, so I'm just going to dry fit everything together first. Make sure everything is where it should be. So the engine hook will be there. The sleeve will go on over that and slide down to our mark that we just made there. And then our green rings, the engine block will go up here, forward of the engine hook. And then this centering ring here will go on this part. Okay, now the opening in the centering ring here is going to be at the launch lug, so that, as we can see later on down here, that's where the launch lug will go. It will be right in here. So when you go to put this on, usually when you see these types of rings, they go down here at the bottom to allow this to move. In this model, it is not. It's going to go up here at the top. It actually goes at the very edge, and then we'll line up with our launch lug line. So now we just need to glue it all together. For this step, you can use white glue or wood glue. I like to use wood glue as it dries a little bit faster and it is usually a little bit stronger at least. And so for our retaining ring here, we're going to slide that down back to its position. So I'm just going to take and run a bead of glue just forward of my line. Run that all the way around. And I'm going to be careful here though not to get any where that launch lug line is. Just in case we don't want any buildup. We can go ahead and circle around the rest here and kind of spread it with a finger. And it's okay if you get some on the hook itself, because it won't make any difference there. Okay, and now I'm just going to go ahead and come down. My line got a little bit covered up by the, there's my line. Okay, I'm just going to move that down there. And I'm just going to take my finger and smooth away, making a really fine fillet basically, that excess glue there. And I'm going to let that dry for a few minutes before I start doing anything else to it. Now that the engine hook sleeve glue has dried, we'll go ahead and install the other two rings. So the first will be the thrust ring that goes inside in the front. And here I'm just going to use a little applicator again to put my glue in. So here I'm just going to run glue right around the inside. And I don't want to get too much because we don't want to squish a bunch of glue forward, or actually aft, where the motor is going to be. So I'm going to thin that around. Okay, and then this is just going to slide in until it rests against the forward portion of the engine hook. I'm just going to push that out a little bit. It will tend to dip further in on the end, on the side that doesn't have the engine hook there, and so I'm just trying to make it even all the way around. Alright, and then our other one here, as I mentioned earlier, this is going to go at the forward end, and the split goes right there and will have the launch lug on it. Now, looking forward here, what we'll end up doing is cutting the launch lug to size so that it fits in between here. So the launch lug itself will not go into this gap, but the launch rod will. Okay. So here I'm going to just put a layer of glue inside this ring, just because it's really convenient to do so. Alright, and I'm just going to stick it on the end here and press it together. Now if you don't get it exactly on the launch lug lines here, that's not a big deal. You'll just shift your launch lug over a little bit. And here I'm just going to hold it for a few minutes and wait till it gets tacky enough to hold itself in place. If you have trouble keeping this held in place, you can also put a little piece of masking tape there to be sure it doesn't move. So once again, I'm going to let this dry, and then we'll move on to attaching the launch lug here in just a moment. Now that the glue is dried on this, I'm going to measure my launch lug, and I'm simply going to put this so that one end is right against the ring there at the gap, and the other's down here, and so we need to cut it so that it fits between these two rings, the retainer and the centering ring there. And so once we've got that, it's just a matter of cutting this off. Okay, now we'll make sure that fits again. Okay, that will do just nicely. And so now I'm just going to run a small bead of glue so now I'll just run a small bead of glue here. And I'm just going to stick that right on. Okay. And this, since it's such a small launch lug, we really don't have to worry about it shifting a lot here. Right, I am going to look down and make sure it's centered. And here I'm going to shift it so it's just touching the ring there, and that way I will know that it's even between the two of them. Okay. So even if I'm outside my lines a little bit there, I want to make sure that looking down there that it's evenly spaced between the edges of the split ring there. And then once again, I'm going to go ahead and just set this aside and let that glue dry once more. While the glue on the motor mount is drying, now I can cut out the legs here. So they don't look very leggy right now, but once they're folded up, they will be the combination fin and legs. And here I'm going to use my hobby knife and a straight edge. And these we need to be fairly exact with. If you're more comfortable with it, you could use scissors here as well. And here I went ahead and just cut completely edge to edge. That way I don't have to worry about, well, did I quite get it to the corner or not? We'll just go there. Now I do have to be more careful with this one, because I don't want to cut into the neighboring piece. And here using a steel ruler is preferential to a plastic or a wood one, because you don't have to worry about your knife gouging into that and taking you off of where you want it to be. Okay, so there's one cut out, and as I mentioned earlier in the video, this is really why this is considered a more advanced kit, not because of any parts it has, but it does require some skill and some patience to precisely cut out these pieces. So off camera, I'm going to go ahead and cut out the other two legs, and then we'll come back. I finished cutting out the fin leg pieces here. And before I go on to folding them, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing here for the body. And so once again, I'm just going to cut these with my hobby knife all the way around. The tricky part here was we do have this curved piece that's going to have to be done freehand. Okay, and that does it for all of our cardboard pieces. For this next part, we need to fold our cutout fins. And here it's a good idea to have something that's a little bit thicker than most rulers. So I've my steel ruler here isn't very thick and it's not going to work as well. What they show in the instructions is maybe a thicker wood ruler or a small piece of lumber, something like that. What we need is something that has a nice square edge to it and enough depth that will allow us to bend a fold at the appropriate places. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and use my fin line marking guide here. Okay, and for most of these folds, we're folding them down away from the decorative surface. And again, here, this is going to take a little bit of patience. And as you do these, don't try and do the whole fold at once. Give it a little bit of a crease. Okay? And then make sure that it's going where you want it to. And you may have to kind of turn your edge around to find just the best place to do this. All right, and then once you've got it in position, go ahead and give it a good crease here. Okay, so according to this, at each line here, including the tabs, these are all going to get folded downward, except for these two. Okay, so the two on the thicker end here, those will get folded up. Let's come back over here now and do the other tab. Now here we got a problem, is that even though these need folded up, it's really hard to see them initially. So I'm going to go ahead and fold them down initially. Okay, that'll just give me a crease line, and I'm going to fold it down. That's not where it goes. We want to fold it up again. Okay, I just folded it down to make sure that I've got a good line to follow. So when we have this all together, we'll fold that in, and this will all be held together. Now I'll come back to that. I'm going to fold the other two fins off camera, and then we'll come back and attach the fins first together onto themselves, and then we'll fold up the actual rocket body. Now that I've got all the folds in place, I'm going to glue this together, and when I do this, the tab here, the white tab that does not have the extra little flap on it, that's going to go inside first, and then the outer flap will go over that, and then this little end flap folds inward. So to prep this, I'm going to just sand it a little bit, and this is not in the instructions here. But this is fairly glossy cardboard, So I'm just going to sand these tabs a little bit to roughen them up. I'm just using some 150 grit sandpaper here. And then I'll do the same thing here. Now be careful on this side that you don't scrape off the color. If you don't have any sandpaper handy, that's fine. You don't need to do this step. I think it's just going to lock in the glue a little bit better. And then here I'm going to just run a really thin bead of glue here. I don't want a whole lot. This is one of those cases where less is more. All right, but I'm doing this on the underside of the longer white tab. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and fold this back into shape. Okay, bring that over and tuck this one in. Okay, and if you have any glue squeezing out, try to clean that up as quickly as possible. And now I'm just going to hold this in place for a few minutes to let the glue set, and I will finish the other two fins off camera, and then we'll come back and do the rocket body. All three of my fins slash legs are done now, and so the glue is set. I don't see any gaps here. Alright, so I'm going to set those aside. And next we're going to fold the body of the rocket. And this is going to be done in the same way. And all of these folds are going to be down away from the finished surface all the way around here. Fortunately, all of these ones have lines, so you can get your initial crease using your straight edge there, and then finish by simply creasing along the lines. There we go. Now, just as I did with the fins, I'm going to go ahead and roughen this just a little bit. Now, in this case, this is going together like this. Okay, so there's no additional tab there. So when I roughen this, I'm just going to do this part here on the upward side. And then I'm going to do the edge on the back side here. Okay. And then just as we did before, glue that together. Again, you don't want too much glue here. You just want a nice even film. Okay, and we're just going to match up the edges here. I'm going to just hold this for a minute or two and then let it dry, and then we'll come back again. Our next step is to cut out the base and then glue it to the main body piece. And this is laser cut, so this should come out fairly easily. I'm just going to take my knife and cut off the little remaining tabs in there. So that should just fall away freely. And then the same for the inside. There are a few little tabs left there. Now when we put this together, we need to check and make sure that we have the right alignment. So this is the launch lug notch. That is going to be on the same side as the launch lug notch here. Okay, so this will go like this. Look at this from the bottom. The general idea here is to get the base just inside the main body piece here. That's causing some difficulty. I'm just going to take a little bit of sandpaper here and just lightly sand all around. This also helps remove some of that soot from the laser cutter. And this will give you a little bit better bonding surface when we go to glue it. Now just do this a little bit at a time. A little bit of coordination, almost more than I have. Okay, I'm going to give that just a little more sanding. So this is just dry fit to make sure everything is where it needs to be. And now what we're going to do, according to the instructions, is we're going to lay a bead of glue right on this inside edge here, all the way around. And then when we put this in, that glue will go right along the edge of the base here. So make sure that you know where your launch lug lines are, because all this stuff is going to have to go together. And if you glue this tilted the wrong way, where the launch lug lines, or the launch lug notches don't line up, it's going to be really hard to fix after that. So for this part, I'm just going to use my wood glue again and an applicator. Again, I just want it right along the edge. Alright, everything is in place. now I'm just going to let this dry once more, and when we come back we'll put in the engine mount. Our next step is to put the motor mount into the main rocket body here, and as you can see in the instructions, when this is done, the centering ring here should be flush with the top of the hexagonal body. Now the problem you're going to run into is trying to get this round ring into this hexagonal tube, and at the same time get the bottom part of the motor mount to come through here. And so this, if you've got one handy, a used motor you can go ahead and put in here, or if you have one of the yellow motor spacers that come with a lot of the Estes kit, that will work. And so I'm going to do a couple of things here. First, I'm going to put it in backwards, and this is just to kind of stretch out those corners a bit. Alright, and now I'm just putting a little bit of pressure out to the side here, and just help round those up a bit. Now with the old motor in here, this is going to provide a little bit of an extension, so make sure you got your launch lug going the right way here. Alright, and then down on the bottom we need to pull this through, and so by having that motor there, that gives me something else to hang on to and keep centered while I'm trying to get this part in. And this is probably the trickiest part of the whole rocket. Okay, finally. Alright, now we'll go ahead and move this through. Now what I don't want to do is lose that again. So I'm going to push this up a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to put some glue on there. But I'm going to do so that I do not have to reposition that once more. So I'm going to take a little bit of glue here on my applicator. Put that around. Be careful that you don't get glue down in the launch lug hole. Now have some tissue ready or some other wiping apparatus here. Alright, so I can drop that all the way in. And now I can apply a little more glue here. Okay, now before I push that up, I'm going to do the same thing down here on the aft end. And again, being careful not to get any on the launch lug hole there. A little bit sloppy here, but I'll wipe that up here in just a moment. Okay, now I'm going to push that back in until I'm flush here, and now I'm going to wipe off my excess glue. Down here I'm going to do the same thing. Just going to wipe around there. If you're using the old motor in here like I am, make sure you don't glue the motor into the motor mount. Okay, and at this stage I'm going to very carefully remove that motor. Alright, so once again we've got a lot of drying to do here. With the main body of the rocket assembled, our last step is to glue on the legs. And these are going to go into the white spaces here on alternating sides of the rocket. And so these just fit on so they cover up the white areas. And I'm going to do like I did with the assembly of the legs here. I'm just going to roughen up the surface on the inside surfaces here where it's going to be attached, and then carefully do the same thing here. Alright, so I'm more concerned about not scratching off the color along the edges, so be a little bit careful here. And if you don't want to do this, the instructions don't indicate this, so it'll probably glue together all right. But this just gives a little bit more gripping surface. Okay, and then that's really all you need to do. I'm just taking the gloss off. Okay, now the thing I want to be careful about here is these need to be glued on firmly, but at the same time we don't want glue seeping out along the edges where it's going to interfere with the color scheme. So I'm going to use an applicator. And this is actually a case where less glue is going to be better. So we want a thin film that's going to adhere quickly and not squeeze out. Okay, and then we're just going to set this into place. And I'm just going to hold this flat. Come back there. Not sure why it's doing that. Okay, so I'm just going to hold this for a few minutes and then I'll move on to the next one and the final one, and I'll come back when this is all assembled. I have all three fins attached now, although the glue has not completely dried, so I'm leaving it in this upside down position. And if you're just ready to launch this, give it at least an hour for that glue to dry. By using a thin film that should dry fairly quickly. And I'm sure you've noticed by now that this does not have a recovery system. It's simply using a combination featherweight tumble recovery here. And the recommended engines for this are a B60 or a C60, which are actually booster engines, but because this does not have a system to deploy, it does not need an ejection charge. That being said, I don't see any reason why you couldn't use a standard single stage or upper stage engine in this. If you do, I would recommend one with a short delay charge. Okay, so that's what it looks like. You might consider putting a clear coat on this, as the colors are fairly easily scratched. That might just give it a little bit more durability there. But with that, just letting the glue dry, this will be ready for flight, and I hope it flies successfully for you.